Pipe support locations. Again, when we are talking about pipe supports, this is the important topic. So in this section we are going to talk about how we are going to determine the pipe support locations. What are the various parameters which help us to determine the locations. So as we talked about in previous section, this section also, if you go to this link, you will see few of the multiple choice questions at the beginning, where you can select, we can look into the question, and these are the options. Suppose you select any of these options and you click over show answer. If it is correct, then it will turn into green. If you select any other option which is wrong, then it will become red in color. So after that you can look into the explanation also. So similarly for this section we have covered few questions. You can look into this. If you already know about how we determine the pipe support locations, then you can refresh your knowledge. Otherwise you can test your knowledge once you go through this section. So in previous sections we talked about the purpose of pipe support and pipe restraints, pipe support standards. Now in this section we are going to talk about how we determine the pipe support locations. What are the various parameters? So if you see here, you can look into various principles. First of all, let us talk about why these are important. We talked about 10 parameters when we were talking about the purpose of pipe supports, right? So similar to that, we already know how important these pipe supports are, right? So there are few principles which help us to determine the location. For example, the first one, if you talk about the straight sections, right, there will be few fittings, turns, valves, flanges, instruments, right, in any of the piping systems. So we try to locate these supports in the straight section first, right? This reduces the stress concentration and help us to distribute the loads evenly. Second point which we can consider is instrument proximity. If there are few instruments in piping system, for example PGPT, etc., then we can look into location of the pipe support which is not interfering with these instrument locations, right? Expansion loops, there will be few of the expansion loops in the piping system which help us to accommodate the expansion and contraction. For example, if there are pumps, right, or compressors or any other critical equipment, then these loops will help us to distribute the loads. Fourth section, which is one of the principles, important principle, is friction reduction. We always try to minimize the friction within the system, right? First we need to evaluate the need for friction reducing slides between pipe and support, right? If you look at this picture here, there is a support between this T member and pipe. So we are talking about this friction, right? First we need to check whether we need to we need any friction reduction between pipe and support steel or not. If required, we can provide those frictions. This is really important, especially with respect to high temperature pipelines, because the movement of line will be more when we are dealing with high pressure, high temperatures. Then maintenance accessibility, we should locate these supports in such a way so that there is no interference for maintenance activities. So that means this is also an important parameter which help us to finalize the location of pipe supports. Minimize spring hangers. Spring hangers, as we all know, these are very costly, right? Although we require the hangers just to offer the flexibility within the piping system, but these we consider it as complex supports. So we always want to minimize these spring supports. So these are few of the general principles which we really need to look into when we are deciding the location of pipe supports. There are few additional thumb rules which we should consider. For example, the first one is spacing. For horizontal run, we know there is a criteria, maybe that is different from project to project, but with respect to pipe size, we always define the spacing between two supports in our support standard. So that is again become the thumb rule while deciding the locations. For example, if the line size is 36 inch, right, so we don't have to maintain 6 meter between two supports, it can go higher. Another is changes in direction. If line is changing from north to south or south to north, right, there can be scenarios where we need to look into the pipe support locations, right. We always try to provide the supports close to elbow so that the system becomes stable, or whenever there is a changes in direction to counteract the bending stresses, right. So that means whenever there is a bend, there is a change in direction, there will be few bends. Just to avoid those stresses, we can add extra support near elbows when we are going to take a turn. Then heavy components. Locate support near heavy valves and fittings to minimize their contribution to overall load. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to distribute the load to this pipe support from the piping system. So whenever we see any heavy item, heavy valve, heavy fitting within the piping system, we try to locate the support near those fittings, near those valves, so that the system becomes stable. Available structures, it is again just to optimize the overall cost. If we have nearby beams or columns or any structural member, we can always attach our secondary supports to those structures so that we can plan the primary supporting over those available structural members. This really saves the material and simplifies the installation. Then future needs. Sometimes we already know there is a potential future expansion possibilities, so we need to plan the supporting considering those requirements which may be there in future, right, so that if in future there is some expansion, then also the system will remain stable. So these are few of the parameters which we really need to look into when we are deciding the pipe support locations. So this was all about this section, that was determining the pipe support locations. In next sections, we'll look into the determination of loads and movements. Right. So thank you for watching. See you in the next part.